You're listening to the Feed Podcast. New episodes drop every Thursday morning.
Well, the team behind the Cabbage lobby has probably received more good press thanks to the Koreans than anything the Irish ever did for them. Of course, my memory is primarily of sweet and sour cabbage soup, but produce options in the middle of winter, especially in the Midwest, are kind of bleak.
Wow, this is crazy. Is there a Cabbage lobby? No, or did you just make that up? Okay.
Did you see the Portlandia episode where they were talking about celery and they were talking about...
It's very true. There no doubt is a Cabbage lobby, but that's not what I grew up at all with. I grew up with lots of cabbage, but remember, I grew up in Oklahoma in a barbecue restaurant, so that meant slaw. And we had two different kinds of slaw. And when I was a little kid, my father took me to what was basically a farmer's market, but it was a commercial farmer's market. We bought directly from the farmers, the potatoes that we cooked with, all the cabbage that we cooked with. It wasn't until later when that was abandoned and stuff started coming in from California and other parts. But I grew up thinking of cabbage as the year-round vegetable because it stores so well. And that's how we got slaw in all the barbecue places.
And if they didn't have matzo ball soup in the deli, we had sweet and sour cabbage soup. That was literally how we had cabbage as a kid, was always in a soup.
I never tasted any kind of like cooked cabbage until I left Oklahoma. Oddly enough, I did. I had read recipes for it, but I'd never had it.
Fun fact that our intern Linnea found for us. Cabbage was anthropomorphized. Is that how you say anthropomorphized?
Yes.
In the 80s into the lovable Cabbage Patch Kids, which became a symbol of America, becoming the first official mascot of the U.S. Olympic team in '92. How crazy is that?
That's pretty crazy. I think that's a fact that just needs to go back into the archives. I'm not sure.
But I will say, cabbage is front and center these days because of this Korean influence and this love of Korean food.
Absolutely.
And we're seeing Napa cabbage.
And more of it, I think, is fermented cabbage now than just fresh cabbage, though I love the fresh stuff too. So coming up on today's show, a cabbage challenge with the Chef of Kimski here in Chicago, as both he and I attempt to come up with an easy weeknight meal in 15 minutes or less using just cabbage and 5 other ingredients that you can pretty much find anywhere. Stay with us. There's a lot more to cabbage than just coleslaw.
This is the Feed Podcast. I'm Steve Dolinsky, a food and travel reporter at ABC 7 News, the Chicago Tribune, and Canada's Globe and Mail.
And I'm Rick Bayless, the chef and owner of Chicago's Frontera Grill, Topolobampo, Choco Leña Brava, and host of Public Television's Mexico One Plate at a Time.
And every week, the Feed takes a deep dive into the world of professional chefs, restaurateurs, food artisans, and drink experts, sharing their stories and uncovering their passion for food and drink. But that's not all. Rick and I are always traveling the globe for our jobs. We're eating and drinking and immersing ourselves in the local culture. And if we find something exciting along the way, there's a good chance it's going to find its way here to our James Beard Award-winning podcast. Well, one of the things we love about Chicago is the ethnic diversity. In one neighborhood, several cultures coexist. For example, in Bridgeport, just south of the city, you have people who've emigrated from Poland, Ireland, and Mexico, some even from Korea. And it's this delicious mashup that gives us our guest today, the Chef of Kimski here in Chicago, Won Kim. Chef, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here in the kitchen.
So tell us about your background.
So I was born in Korea, grew up in the west side of Rogers Park.
From the far north side of the city.
Far north side of the city, a little west. So grew up around Indian food, grew up off of Devon, moved to the suburbs for a second, came right back, moved to Lakeview. I've been living there ever since.
What's your culinary background? What's your training?
Mostly my mom, helping her actually make kimchi and process cabbage and stuff like that for the week's dinner and stuff like that. Professionally, I was a catering coordinator actually down the street for the ABA for a while. At the same time, I was doing front of house duties at a small restaurant up north, and then went to Whole Foods. Going to culinary school at the same time as doing Whole Foods. And I took over their culinary kitchen, their marketing kitchen at the Lincoln Park location. And I would do like beer dinners out of there and do other programming out of there. At the same time, staging at places and helping friends out of restaurants. I was kind of like their wild card because I did art full time, which paid the bills. Because as you know, cooking
this is quite the story. Art full time. Most people do art and then they have to have a day job to support the art. And you were supporting yourself with that.
Time. When the quote-unquote recession hit in 2009, I lost a lot of clients and stuff like that because they found food and drinking way more important, which, I'm right there with them on that. So I kind of just went to the food side and kind of just immersed myself in that world. And then after Whole Foods, I went to Bridgeport a lot as like a destination for me to kind of get away from the north side, go to a place where I don't really know anyone, where I won't run to anyone I know. Not to say that I'm like some popular guy or anything, but just would go over there and it was super chill. Would go there and drink by myself and just kind of sit around and just decompress. And they used to have a industry night on Mondays. It was basically like a real DIY. Get a Polish sausage, put some, jarred kimchi from Jungbu on there with some mustard and just kind of slam it together based off of the owner's sister who used to hold these kind of barbecues, these kind of fusion
Maria's
barbecues.
You're talking about.
Yeah, this is
so
Maria's sister. Yeah.
packaged. Yeah, this is a bar and a liquor store in Bridgeport.
Otherwise known as a slashy, yes.
And you brought, or somebody brought the stuff from Jungbu, which is our best Korean market.
Absolutely.
In Chicago.
And they would just set up in the backyard, in the back patio, the bar, and just invite guests to come in and make their own Polish sausage.
Sounds very Bushwick.
Yeah,
Brooklyn.
It's so Brooklyn, dude. And then after a while, other chefs and other industry folks would go there and drink on Mondays, and they would offer their own recipes and be like, hey, I actually make a really good mustard that could go on top of this, or actually, have scraps that could make sausage. I would go in there and make kimchi, and then I like jokingly did like a soigné plate of a Polish sausage because people kept taking a lot more than they should have. So I would just like kind of just plate it for them and do like a real like joke take on Polish sausage plate. And
so were you mostly cooking Korean food during all this period, or
no? I
was
mean,
that more your home food?
That was more my home food. I was cooking, whatever my chefs would tell me to make for them. I did a lot of when I was stage and help friends out at like off sites and stuff like that. I would just do their food. I would never ever want to implement my style of cooking into their food. That's just.
But these barbecues, these casual get-togethers, led to Kimski then?
Correct. So after that was happening, after they saw me jokingly plate this for everyone on a paper plate, they kind of got the idea. They knew they were going to expand the bar and wanted to add a food element to kind of add to the whole food scene in Bridgeport and expand that world. They kind of offered it to me as like, hey, we're looking for a street food, quick casual, good, blah, blah, blah. I said no like 3 times. I was like, I actually love my life as a freelancer. I like being able to have my own schedule, paint walls, and actually make money. So they caught me off guard. I was really like blacked out drunk there one night, and they asked me again, and I was like, sure, that sounds like fun. Sounds like a great time. And then
when did you guys open?
We opened May of 2016.
Okay, so would you describe it as sort of Polish-Korean mashup? Because the owners also are kind of half and half.
So the kids, the Marzuskis, are Korean and Polish. Maria's 100% Korean. Their father was Polish, and that idea just kind of, it made sense. And Cabbage was the staple between the two cultures. How
I wonder why we asked you to do this challenge today.
Yeah, right. I wonder. Kind of makes sense.
So give me an example. How does it bridge the gap? Give me an example of.
Well, basically, it's if you want to, at the base of it, it's slowly rotting cabbage. Both cultures have, and develop these similar sour flavors, except one uses like a chili element, while the other just kind of while the other culture uses other herbs and like peppercorns and bay leaves and herbaceous things of that nature, while we just use straight ginger garlic, more acidic flavors.
Yeah. And so out of that was born the name Kimski.
Right. So my last name is Kim, and they're the Marzuskis. So it only made sense.
So give me 2 examples from your menu.
The classic Maria standards. It's the Polish sausage that we used to grill in the back, but it's our recipe now. We actually did the whole Polish sausage, a soju mustard that we make, and the krauchi, which is our kind of signature red cabbage, kind of applying the Polish side with the Korean ingredients and making sauerkraut that way. And then we also have the scallion potato pancakes. Both cultures have pancakes.
Right.
Both cultures love oniony things that make your breath stink. So, scallions, potatoes, filling, wheat-based thing. We combine a lot of like sour cream with tamari. Adds a salt to the kind of more milky base. So it kind of balances and kind of makes sense to us.
So all this creativity led to being mentioned in the Michelin Guide most recently.
Yeah, that was weird.
And I bet it was weird. And also Korean barbecues on Mondays in the summer.
Yes.
Okay, well, today should be a great challenge.
Yes, yeah. So Juan has accepted our challenge this week using cabbage as the main ingredient, which should be easy for him. He's setting up in our test kitchen right now, and when we come back, we'll both attempt to make an easy weeknight meal in 15 minutes or less. Stay with us.
Podcast. To get your weekly fix, subscribe to us on iTunes or visit our website, thefeedpodcast.com.
You're listening to The Feed Podcast. Get the inside scoop by following us on Twitter at The Feed Podcast.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. We're up in the Frontera Test Kitchen today with Juan Kim, the chef over at Kimski, a Polish-Korean mashup restaurant in Bridgeport, just south of downtown. And I wanted to ask you, I forgot to ask you in the last segment, Chef, tell me about that tattoo on your left forearm.
Oh, this tattoo is basically a hand holding chopsticks. It's basically my first utensil that I ever used to eat food with. And I always love the illustrations at like the Chinese restaurants that give you the directions.
It looks like that.
Yeah.
I thought maybe you had forgotten how to use them and you needed to
Oh, it's
have
always a
some sort of,
reminder,
like,
so
visual
just in
guide.
case. Yeah, no, people always ask me, how do you hold chopsticks? I'm like, well, just look at my arm. There
We'll
you
have
go.
a picture on our website. Okay, so Rick will explain how this works.
Okay, so you've got 15 minutes to make the dish, and you've got 5 extra ingredients besides the cabbage. Take it away, and I think we're about ready to start the countdown, right?
We don't count, by the way, oil or butter or salt and pepper.
Oh, sounds good.
Okay. All right, Matt, our producer, is going to start the clock now. 15 minutes begins now. Okay, tell us what your plan is, Chef.
So my plan is to kind of first do my mise en place, just get everything set up. So I'm chopping a red onion right now.
And what are your 5? Red onion?
5 is red onion, pork tenderloin, some bacon, some fresh thyme, and some Tokayo beer.
Oh!
Suck up.
Something that I know pretty well.
Suck up. Okay, Rick, what are you doing?
Okay, don't kill me. Don't kill me for doing this. But when I think about cabbage in Mexican cuisine, the first thing that pops into my mind always is pozole, because it always has this wonderful pile of thin shredded cabbage over the top. So I thought, how in the world could I make some pozole in 15 minutes? Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start with a can of the pozole corn. Okay, that would just say hominy when you look for it in the grocery store. I'm going to take some chicken vegetable soup, and that's going to give me the meat component in it. And then I love red chili pozole, so I'm starting with enchilada sauce as a base, okay? So pozole should legitimately take you about a day and a half to make. You've got to do all kinds of parts to it.
You only see it on the weekends usually, pozole and menudo.
Right, and that usually has to do with the fact that it takes so long to make a really good pot of pozole, and plus it's sort of drinking food or hangover food, so you'll see it in a lot of the Mexican places then on the weekends. So what I want to do is to make something that you could actually make for dinner in 15 minutes, and it's good, but you have to have a decent red chili enchilada sauce.
I got to come to Juan for a bit. He's got a pork tenderloin. You just salt and peppered, and now you're going to do cutting it up?
Yeah, so what I did was I dried out the pork tenderloin first. You want to make sure that's fairly dry and seasoned well before it goes into a hot pan. So I have 2 pans going here, both kind of heating up.
And Rick, by the way, had just poured the hominy with the liquid into a pot.
Into a pot, yes. I'm just going to start heating that up now, and then I'm going to open the chicken vegetable soup to add to it.
Okay, so, and Juan has got 2 pans heating up over there. You just poured, it looked like chopped up bacon or
Correct.
What?
So I just chopped up some thick cut bacon. What I'm going to do is render out some of the fat to cook the cabbage in. What I'm also going to do is once it gets nice and crispy and gets all the fat out, I'm going to take the bacon out and add it later, and then deglaze the pan with some of the beer. And then for now, we're letting the oil heat up for the tenderloin. Basically, what we're going to do is make sure it's nice and hot, so it could get some color. Hence the seasoning beforehand. You want to get a nice crusty sear on top, and then we're going to lower the heat after we get the good color and start basting with butter at the end.
Okay, Okay, so just to make sure, Rick did not drain that hominy. You poured everything in with the chicken vegetable soup also.
One of the things about making good pozole is that you cook the dried hominy corn in water, usually with some onions and garlic, for a really, really long time. It would probably take 4 to 6 hours for it, but most people will tell you 12 hours is even better. And that broth that you create is one of the defining elements of good pozole. So I need it because when I poured in my chicken vegetable soup, I got the richness of the meat part. This is going to be a chicken pozole, not a pork pozole. If I found pork vegetable soup someplace, I would have used that, but I'm using chicken and making it a chicken version. So I got both things. I got the broth from the pozole and I got the broth from the chicken soup.
I can tell that our guest has worked in sort of catering and seat of his pants situations because he is a fast worker. He's already chopped up some red onions, and while he was doing that, he went back to his bacon. He got his pork tenderloin in the other pan. He's not messing around.
No, I've done competitions. I'm kind of competitive.
Kind of.
I mean, I don't know. It's not my fault. It's my parents'
That's all right.
fault.
Now we're getting to cabbage here. Now, by the way, I did not specify what type of cabbage. I could have said Napa cabbage. I mean, but you're using green and red cabbage, both of you guys, right?
I'm using just the green cabbage.
I'm
just green cabbage.
Green cabbage as well. Yeah.
Oh, okay. The red is out here just for
Yeah,
decoration.
it's kind of Mardi Gras-ish to use both. You know, I kind of like just singular colors.
All right, so you're both using green cabbage. Rick is now just really finely slicing up his green cabbage.
Use my mandolin, but this is an easy recipe to do, so I'm actually going to slowly slice by hand this cabbage. Now this, my mixture of the hominy and the chicken vegetable soup is about to come to a boil now, so I'm going to add red enchilada sauce. So you can find that pretty much everywhere. Look on the label to see if it includes red chilies and garlic, maybe some herbs and spices, but you want to keep it pretty simple because that's how you would make the base of a really good red pozole. So I'm going to open my packet here of the red enchilada sauce and pour that in.
It is obviously the Frontera brand, which.
Doing it, but you could do it with others. There's actually a number of really good red enchilada sauces out there.
But no, we're in the house of Rick. We got to use the Frontera. Okay, so we got 5 minutes down, 10 to go. It looks like Juan continues to saute quickly. He's working on the bacon over there, cooking that through. Rick has just added that enchilada sauce, the entire packet, into this pot. It looks like it's a one-pot meal, which is nice. You don't have to dirty too many things.
Pot meal, a good sort of hearty soup for dinner is what I'm thinking of. And if you have more than 15 minutes, not that you have to have it, but if you want to let it simmer for a few more minutes, it would all be great.
Okay, Juan continues to. Are you just going to sear the outside of that tenderloin? You got to cook it through.
I'm gonna sear it first, and then I'm gonna lower the heat. I'm gonna add a tab of butter and some fresh thyme and start kind of basting it and letting it cook through. Obviously, hopefully you would have more than 15 minutes to make food at home, so you can definitely choose to kind of turn on the oven, preheat it, sear it, and then put it in the oven, let it cook through. But for the sake of the challenge, I kind of want to add as much flavor as I can, so hence the fresh thyme and the butter.
Rick is cutting up his cabbage. You took the core out of here, right?
Yeah, I cut the core out of it because I don't want that part of it. I just want the tender leaves to be in here.
Okay,
and then obviously the thinner you can slice it, the better. But I love the flavor of the raw cabbage in this because when you add the raw cabbage to the bowl of pozole and then stir it in, you end up with slightly cooking the cabbage and bringing out a little bit more sweetness. That's what I really love about pozole.
Typically, like a casa de pozole, you would see a lot of these garnishes. It reminds me of part of the Mexican version of pho. You see radishes, you see maybe tortillas or chicharron,
Right.
pork skins, you see cabbage, right?
There are a lot of things that you can add to pozole, but the classic things would be just the raw cabbage and then some sliced radishes. You have to have lime to squeeze in, and then dried Mexican oregano to sprinkle over the whole thing. So those are what I'm going to have here. That puts me one ingredient over. So if you just happen to have radishes around, you may actually see that I've used them in my photo, but that was my sixth ingredient here. But I will tell you that the radishes look really stunningly beautiful.
Yeah. Okay. And now Juan has added his sliced cabbage and red onions to the pan. Is that the one with the bacon, or you took the bacon out?
I took the bacon out and I left the fat in as much as I can so that kind of cooks it and flavors it at the same time. At the same time, it's also kind of deglazing the pan. So with the addition of the beer towards the end, it'll help cook it through and make it a little more tender. And it'll also give it a more of like a weedy kind of bready quality to the whole dish and create a sauce.
Matt reminded me we're under 7 minutes to go, so just over halfway through now, under 7 minutes. Rick very thinly slicing that radish, and it's so funny. You have this sort of zen, quiet, sort of slow pace. Juan over there is like furious.
Yeah, he's really cooking. I'm only heating. This is what we call a dump and stir dish. I am just dumping stuff in a pot, stirring it around, and waiting for it to come to a simmer.
You're basically Sandra Lee today, but that's okay.
I'm totally a Sandra Lee today. It's kind of unfortunate, but we played around with this idea because when we were talking about what would we do for the cabbage challenge, the first thing that came to my mind was to do pozole, but I said we can't do it in 15 minutes. So we did come up with something that we really liked. So that's what I'm sharing today.
All right.
It's a very zen moment for me.
So the recipe again is going to be on our website, thefeedpodcast.com. We're going to have pictures on our Instagram and Facebook. We got 6 minutes to go. So 6 minutes to go, coming up on 2/3 of the way through. I will give our guests just a gentle reminder. The last 3 to 4 minutes goes pretty quickly. I know you've done this before, though. Okay, so what have you added now to your cabbage and red onion?
I added the rendered bacon back into the dish to kind of help cook it through, get a little bit more color and crisp on it. And then we're about at the stage where we're going to deglaze it with a little bit of the beer.
When you say deglaze, you're adding a liquid and scraping up the bits at the bottom?
Correct. So there's a lot of good flavor stuck in the pan. So we want to get as much of that flavor back into the dish as possible. So we use any kind of like alcoholic beverage or an acid or any kind of vinegars would work as well. Typically a lot of lemon juice would be used in this kind of application, but you know, beer goes a long way and you could drink the beer afterwards or during, which is always kind of nice.
And this Tocayo it's a hominy white ale, yeah?
Yeah, that's a hominy white ale.
Yeah, it's a nice citrus forward flavor, so it kind of acts as almost like a lemon juice type of dish.
Rick is doing a little taste now while Juan adds in a lot of those thyme sprigs.
Fresh thyme. Again, just to kind of add another layer of flavor. I didn't want to put it in too early because I didn't want the herb to burn. So I kind of wanted to kind of make it more fragrant.
But explain what you did there. You've got quite a bit of the thyme sprigs, and you just sort of toss them all in there. Usually, it might be tied up, or just you might take the leaves off the stems. But you threw the whole thing in there.
Yeah, I just put it in there. It's all edible. It's all plant based. Again, like we're going for a rustic kind of approach and kind of method to cooking it. So just putting it in there, unless you're at a restaurant or something, I want to see that there's ingredients in there.
4 minutes.
We're not trying to be subtle here.
4 minutes to go. He continues to turn his tenderloin that he's cut in half in the other skillet, and has a pretty high heat going. Looks like on both. Now he's just added a fair amount of butter to the tenderloin skillet, and you're going to start basting that with a spoon, I'm guessing. And he's going to continue to saute his thyme and cabbage and red onion, and will now start to baste the tenderloin. And Rick is now just tasting.
I'm just tasting and waiting for the full boil to come. It's boiling nicely now, and that will help to integrate all of the flavors. But starting with that chicken soup, that's already been cooked for a long time. And of course, the homony's already been cooked, so all we have to do is kind of heat them up. The one thing about the enchilada sauce is that in order to get something like that into a package, you actually have to bring it up to 185 degrees to pasteurize it. So I know that too is already cooked. So all I have to do is get it all the flavors to meld together.
We've got under 3 minutes now, 2:45 as we speak. Juan is salting, he's seasoning his cabbage, tasting as he goes. He's basted, he's adding another pat of butter to his pan now to continue basting the pork tenderloin with a lot of thyme in there as well. We got about 2.5 to go. Rick continues to taste like the Zen monk that he is, just sort of tasting and setting the spoon down and tasting some more.
Right. That's all I'm doing here.
Very chill.
No, I'm watching Juan cook. See, that's the whole thing. I'm really taking it easy today.
That's okay. Juan, are you going to be okay? 2 minutes to go here. You're going to be all right?
Yeah, I mean, you guys like pork sashimi, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, I love it.
Loves
That's like a new
sashimi.
thing, right? The trend is to cook less.
Now, do you want to? How much do you want to cook that cabbage?
You want to cook it till, you want, in my opinion, I like cabbage with a little bit of bite. I don't like it too wilty, too soft. I think you want to keep its integrity, especially if you're just using it in this kind of an application. The great thing about this kind of recipe is that you could add anything. You could add some carrots for sweetness. You could add some raisins, some currants, any kind of sweet element to it. And it goes with almost anything. Any protein would fare well. Because of how resilient cabbage is. It adds a lot of texture, a lot of good bite.
About a minute to go, Rick has just plated that hominy now into a bowl, garnished with a little bit of lime on the side. You're just adding the raw radish and cabbage to the top.
In that way, it is very much pho-like because you just put the raw ingredients over the top. I've got a couple of segments or wedges of lime on there, but this is the most important aspect of pozole as far as I'm concerned, and it's not pozole without it. That's to take the whole leaf Mexican oregano and put it into the center of your palm, then just rub the two palms together, so kind of in a circular motion so that you crush the leaves, and then all of that raw, dried oregano falls down over the top of the pozole, and then you have the classic pozole with the radishes and the cabbage and lime.
About 30 seconds to go, so his pozole is done, and Juan is going to slice up his tenderloin now, and he's got a couple of pieces. You don't have to have the whole thing cooked through, obviously. We understand for timing.
Right.
You're going to get a couple of slices down on the plate with your cabbage and red onions and thyme. And are you just going to kind of shingle those across the side?
Yeah. I'm going to... How much more time do I have?
About 15 seconds.
All right, 15 seconds. Gotcha.
I'm going to check his other tenderloin here. And we're going to take a break and come back anyway, but you're basically done.
Yes. I'm just trying to get some actual cooked pieces so that I don't poison anyone, which is always important, right?
All right, so as he's slicing up his last bit of tenderloin and putting that on the plate with the cabbage and red onion, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to taste what Juan and Rick have made, and we're also going to preview some scenes from next week's show, so stay with us.
Be a part of the culinary conversation by following us on Facebook/The Feed Podcast.
Have a beef with something you heard? Looking for a little extra side dish? Let us know on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at The Feed Podcast.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. We are up in the Frontera Test Kitchen today with Juan Kim, the executive chef over at Kimski in Bridgeport, which is just south of the city. So you had a little bit of trouble with your time. What would you think you'd do better next time? Just get your tenderloin in earlier? Or?
Either get the tenderloin in a little earlier or maybe portion it or cut it to slices to begin with. I think I'm so used to just cooking the whole piece as a whole, so I didn't think to just kind of portion it. I barely cook for myself at home, so next time, especially for the home, if you don't have a lot of time, definitely, there's nothing wrong with portioning it first and cutting it and seasoning it and then putting it to the fry pan or oven. And again, it's one of those things where you could sear and then just put it in the oven, set it and forget about it.
Yep. So you basted this with some butter, quite a bit of butter and some thyme, and then you draped it around this saute of cabbage, red onion, and bacon.
Correct. So, when I think cabbage, I think about how much you can cook it and still have its integrity with like the texture and everything. And it's getting cold out. I like heartier foods. I want to utilize that beautiful bacon fat that's rendered.
It's the best.
And it really is the best to cook with. And it just flavors everything really well. Adds a nice little richness and kind of gets you want to go outside in the cold. Kind of gets you prepared.
The that bacon fat adds so much richness to this cabbage because on its own it's nothing.
Right,
it's a
it's
cruciferous
water,
vegetable, but
much.
Man, with that bacon fat, you've done such a nice job of infusing it with so much flavor.
Mm-hmm. And then that beer at the end, it really does deglaze everything. Kind of makes a pan sauce in itself.
It
kind
does,
of cooks
and
in that.
it's not bitter. That particular beer has very few hops in it. So when you reduce it, it still stays sweet. And man, it's so good in here. And it adds that sort of beery, yeasty, earthy richness to it. It's really good.
I heard the brewery's local too.
It is local, yes, absolutely.
You could make like a really killer okonomiyaki with this cabbage,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Like a pancake with that cabbage and bacon and red onion. Oh.
And the beauty is, again, like it cooks. I mean, cabbage could go for hours. You know, we do a gawonki every now and then at the restaurant, and
Just describe that for folks not from
gawonki is
Chicago.
basically like a cabbage roll. It's like it's a Polish cabbage roll, and again, it's kind of like pot stickers. You could fill it with whatever you want, as long as the basics are there, like having the stewed cabbage and wrapping it. And adding some kind of red sauce to it. At the restaurant,
What do you mean by red sauce?
like a tomato-based sauce.
okay.
Or, you know, sometimes you could use a white sauce. It doesn't. I think beauty of food and, you know, across kind of having the cultures kind of intersect and cross. You kind of play around and, you know, use different sauces and use different techniques and fillings and stuff like that.
Okay, so Rick is now getting his pozole ready here. You just
Okay,
squeeze
it's
some
ready.
limes and
Yes, I'm gonna give you a spoon there.
you push the cabbage into the soup.
Well, because that's what I love about pozole is that you start to cook the cabbage just a little bit in the hot broth. And it still stays crunchy, but you get that real beautiful softness of the long cooked hominy in there. A little bit of vegetable flavor from the soup, of course, that chicken flavor. And then I added, because you said salt and pepper, you don't have to count. So pepper flakes count as pepper, I think. So I put some pepper flakes in here because I wanted it to be spicier than what I was getting just with that enchilada sauce.
It does have a little bit of heat to it too, but man, that oregano, it's in the background. That is such a great supporting role in terms of a flavor in here. And I also like how that chili has, again, it's drawn into that cabbage and infused it with such great flavor.
Right.
And it's such a textural dish too.
Textural. It's super textural. And when you taste that dried oregano sprinkled over the top of it, I will tell you that when you say pozole to most people in Mexico, the first thing that they'll do is rub their palms together because it's that flavor of the dried oregano that makes it so incredibly distinctive. So I wanted to make sure that we had that on here.
Great dish. Really, two great dishes. Both great dishes. Both recipes going to be on our website.
So wintry.
Oh,
Good. I want to do that technique of deglazing with the Tocayo beer because I think that added such a complexity to it that just knocked my socks off.
I mean, you got to think about, beer as an ingredient. There's so many other ingredients in the beer itself, so that almost acts like, there's just so much going on, and it adds so much.
And you guys work with a lot of beer in the kitchen over at Kimski too, I think.
I think so. Every time I open a lowboy, I see the gift that was given to us the previous night gone. Not to say that our cooks are alcoholics by any means, but it's just weird. It's just weird to me that a 24-pack goes missing in a day.
All right, well, both recipes are going to be on our website, thefeedpodcast.com. Big thanks again to Juan Kim from Kimski. Go see him next time you're in Chicago down in Bridgeport. It's not that far from downtown,
It really
folks.
is.
There's great places down there.
Yeah, I walked here.
Chef, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, coming up next week, how do you tour Thailand and Vietnam like a local?
I'd say this is one of the finer bowls of congee that I've had. The grains of rice aren't supposed to be noticeable, kind of like more mushed in and soup-like, and this definitely checks those boxes.
I'll take a tour of Bangkok, Chiang Mai, and Ho Chi Minh City and see how a couple of well-regarded food tour companies treat their American guests. That's next week on the show.
Remember, you can always contact us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at The Feed Podcast. Or check out our ingredient challenges, get recipes and other information about previous shows by simply visiting our website, thefeedpodcast.com. And don't forget to subscribe and rate the show on iTunes. And be sure to follow me at Rick_Bayless.
And I'm at Steve Dolinsky, that's with a Y. More information about both Juan and Rick's recipes using Cabbage on our website as well. Lene Dominic's our intern. Max Dolinsky supervised today's music. Bureaucratic wrote and performed our theme song, and the Feed podcast is edited by Matt Cunningham at Truthful Enthusiasm. Whether you're an individual or institution, get your story online with truthfulenthusiasm.com. Thanks for listening, everybody.